feel like I'm nipping at everyone's heels to get them back inside, but thanks very much for coming in and putting up with me being a bit pushy at times. So this is our last session. We've got 2 presentations and then I'll do a bit of a summary. That's the easy bit for the MC, isn't it? Just summarise a day chock full of content in 10 or 15 minutes. Then we'll hear from Kate to round out the day. So we'll move straight into it. So our first speaker is Ilya Heridas, who's the Director of City Shaping at the City of Adelaide. I love the term city shaping. We call the regional plan that I helped with Stuart Mosley to do in South East Queensland shaping SEQ. Yeah, so it really is a sense of a bigger thing than just where land use falls, isn't it? So Ilya is built a career that has influenced and contributed to the development of place through policy, programs and infrastructure. When paired with his own love affair with design, infrastructure, sport, art and the community, he feels very fortunate to get to do what he does now. And he's going to be talking to us about some of the big moves that the City of Adelaide has made. I think that'll do for an intro, Ilya, and please welcome Ilya to the stage. Cheers.
Okay, thank you very much for having me here this afternoon. I won't reintroduce myself, thank you for the introduction. Looking across the room, what's wonderful and hearing some familiar names. I'm here with you today as a friend and colleague of a whole heap of people and as a new face for others. So hopefully I'm giving you all something that you haven't heard before and haven't heard today. I'm conscious you had a really big program of speakers. In the context of today, I'm another invested voice in change theme, and particularly in the context of Adelaide and South Australia. I'm also very aware, as was introed, that I'm the start of the run home. So thank you for those who've stayed, which is many by the looks of the room. And thanks also to Mella Olsen, who've sponsored this particular part of today's event. So the title slide behind me is pretty traditional, probably what you think of, well, nudge it one. The title slide behind me is very traditional. And probably what you think of if you think city plan. And just want you to hold that thought while I come through the next couple of slides. This is one thing that will be a repeat, but it is important. It's part of the culture of the City of Adelaide that we do acknowledge that we meet on the lands of the Kaurna people, and I'd be remiss if I didn't do that too, as part of what we do at the city, that we respect their values and their elders past, present and emerging, and we recognise their cultural heritage, beliefs and relationship with the land, and we extend that to visitors of other Aboriginal language groups and other First Nation peoples in the room with us today. To nudge that a bit further and in today's context, when we consider what it means when we acknowledge country and and a little bit as a metaphor for what a city plan of the future should entail, I wanted to share what we colloquially call the cultural burn, but what the actual name in the local context, which is Kaurna Gardla Paranti. These practices were developed by Aboriginal people to enhance the health of the land and its people. And that's probably a really nice thing to kind of hold as we think about how we shape place. What it is it includes the burning and preventional burning for the health of particular plants and animals. And this recent example on the screen behind me, which was the first for many years in what we call the city and on the Kaurna Plains, took place in Carriageway Park, Tutunga, which is Park 17 on the corner of South and East Terraces. So as I said, a great metaphor for us as we sort of shift gears a little bit into how we all think about city planning and the future and how we enhance the health of its city and its people. So, a very quick and potted history lesson, but important as we talk change. There's a history of city planning that we're going to draw upon when we talk Adelaide City. Many of you know this. Not only do I suspect, but I know that a number of you in this room have contributed to the body of work behind me, and it's a really relevant legacy piece of work. We don't start from scratch. It's more than just spatial mapping though. There are values and stories associated with traditional owners, to stick with that theme briefly. There's the original city plan in many people's minds in the Western context, Lights Plan, which is of national heritage value. And then there are plans that have followed through the 70s, 80s and 90s with high-level goals and priorities and actions and pilots. There are many studies that have been undertaken, which you'll see there in the 2000 to 2010 column. Again, you probably contributed in consultation or directly in the people in this room, and the current reforms that we're looking at and this little body of work we're going to undertake ahead. So I think this should be the title slide for today's presentation. This is a little bit more of the flavour of what we're talking about in terms of city shaping. The City Plan represents a co-investment of the Capital City Committee between the City of Adelaide and the Government of South Australia. Traditionally, this type of work, back to that original title slide, is what you would all know as structure plans. The last time we did one of those was in the early 90s, that being the City of Adelaide. So why a city plan and why now? Well, a lot has changed. Planning and Design Code, its imminent review, the review of regional plans that are upon us, goals and objectives of cities. And now I'm going to ask all of you to just stick with me on this one. We're going to run some kind of lines here in the context of change. Sustainability, carbon neutral, carbon net zero, embodied carbon, waste management, recycling, circular economy, net positive. There's a fair bit of change in that continuum. Let's go another line. Population growth, talent attraction, migration, brain drain, stemming the brain drain. Another continuum of change that we've all lived through and we're working through now. Economy, industrial revolution, information revolution, manufacturing revolution, manufacturing 2.0, advanced manufacturing, VR, AI, space, all taking place in the city. Communication, telephony, internet, wireless, Internet of Things, 4, 5 and 6G. Communities, resilience, space, affordability, livability, well-being. Localism, neighbourhoodism, precinctism, regionalism. Dare I add, 25% of our population in the City of Adelaide Chinese now, in terms of the multicultural mix, century of the West, moving to a century of the East. This isn't even the full list. But these are many compelling reasons to think deeply about what influences our city and why we plan and why a city plan. You've probably had a heap of data slides. That's all I'm giving you today. Some numbers you're probably all very familiar with, very localised to the local government area, City of Adelaide. So what do we know? We know a lot. As I said, you will have consumed a lot of that data today. We know a lot about the facts of our city. What we've done very recently is we've conducted some market research through McGregor Tan. And what's different about that research versus some of the hard numbers is we've actually talked to people who use the city. We've talked to the big employers, we've talked to city workers, city residents and visitors of the city about their thoughts and views and intentions in and around definition of city. What we've witnessed globally in the 2 years of the COVID-19 pandemic is that people's habits have changed. And that's hard change. So not just I've done something different for the first time in the last 2 years, they've actually changed their behavioural patterns. The new norm is not the old norm. And those habits include how people see cities, their expectations of cities, and how they will use them now and in the future. There is no current metric I'm aware of. I'm interested, I've missed some of the earlier parts of today, so please tell me if one did surface earlier today. But that measures the change in an individual's social and economic engagement with a city. However, we have the insight, we're hearing the stories, and we can address these new habits and the habits we envisage in this work. Now, I don't know about you. I always feel strangely happy, warm and relaxed when I look at this image of our city, a city in the park. And for the record, I'm a resident, I live in the city. So what do we want? Everybody wants a livable and vibrant city. We all appropriately revel in the opportunity to be recognised in this regard, but we all likely define livable differently. For all the content I've covered so far, we aren't embarking on a city plan because it's been a while. We're embarking on a city plan to set our focus towards the city we need to have in the future. So let's step into some context a little further again. We've got a whole bunch of objectives, not just at the City of Adelaide, but every person in this room around cities. And they conflict. They don't all work in partnership. Our role in engagement with you through this process is actually going to be to walk towards how we accommodate these objectives, noting that they kind of push and pull against each other. Some case in points. We're going to hit 50,000. It's a target that's put up. It's probably going to be around 2041 on current growth numbers. But there's a long-held tension between population growth, benefit to the economy, vibrancy, livability and sustainability. And we need to engage with those tensions so the best we can, we hit all of those metrics. Some will argue on that particular thread, nothing needs to change. Hit the number, we can take it, we can handle it, the city's fine. Others will say it needs to be an even more ambitious target, we need more people in the city, and others would probably like it to pause more or less where it is right now. What we know, and I mentioned earlier, is that whether it is changed behaviours due to climate change, COVID, other factors, people's attitudes globally towards cities have changed. Those new habits have formed. Have we changed? Delivery of infrastructure. Just like the concept of paddock to plate that we all do with food, and we like to know where it's come from and that it's sustainable and that it's good for us, those expectations are shifting into infrastructure. We want to know that it's sustainable. We want to know that embodied carbon has been considered. We want to know that it's going to cool the city and not heat a city. We want to know that it's in the right place. These, again, are new and evolving and change concepts in how we deal with built form, and a step before that, how we spatially consider before we implement and put things hard in the ground. And ultimately, more and more the measures aren't profit, aren't return, their well-being, their vibrancy, their vibe, their culture. And we have interrupters which will continue to play in this space, and one of the most interesting ones being technology. At the moment, technology is cutting through the physical domain. For some people, the new infrastructure they're interested is in that technology. They don't care about the space. They're actually engaging in technology to escape the space and to envisage new spaces, metaverses, other plans where they can also plan and shape their own city and not the one in which they actually physically walk in. So how do we, as planners and influencers and shapers of city, enable change? Well, we engage with these concepts. We embrace these concepts, we deal with the tension, and we work through them. So as for the current lens, and I don't want these lists to overwhelm because I actually think we do a remarkable job of rolling all of these things in together, but it does show the complexity and the layering and the depth of what we all sort of deal with in the space of planning and infrastructure response. We aren't just looking at the next iteration of the spatial plan to accommodate development. We're considering what informs that development, why we develop, where we develop, how we develop, and the inclusiveness, of course, and there's a lot of built form imagery there, but our open spaces and our green spaces, and again, we're a city in a park with squares that dot in between it, so it's just much more than the built form. We need that relief within the built environment. The consumer expectation is far greater today than that traditional one that we'd probably define in Australia of just wanting the quarter-acre block and our nice little bit of space in the metropolitan area. Clearly less so in the city and probably not even possible anymore in a residential sense. The city plan is going to be a spatial application of our strategic plan, the opportunity for input into the regional plan, which our colleagues in the state government are obviously undertaking, and to get down to a kind of a precinct level detail that the regional plan is unlikely to provide on its own. In line with strategic goals, the city plan, for those who want a little bit more detail of this particular piece of work, will be a spatial representation of how the city could be shaped to support and drive council's own vision for livability, guide the preparation of our long-term plans, strategic, our financial plans, our investment strategies, actually inform, because we've engaged with others, how we engage with the state government and its planning system, influencing, of course, the next regional plans for Greater Adelaide, and future appropriate amendments to the Planning and Design Code where warranted. We want to enable strategic discussions with key stakeholders. This isn't just those who develop, this isn't just those who buy, it's visitors and a whole range of other people who interface with our city. And inspire, hopefully, and bring to the table co-delivery by key stakeholders, the private sector, state government, developers, and again, aligning our investment in the most effective way possible. The future isn't waiting for us. We all know it's moving around us. And the future is a city plan that has people at its centre. So a lot of the images have been the things and the spots and the places, but it's about the people in this room. It's about the people who are going to inhabit those spaces. This work will provide an opportunity for the city's people, its stakeholders, to discuss challenges and opportunities with us. Some of the goals that we're hoping to achieve, an understanding of the future needs of our cities. You saw the lists and heard the lists, and I'm sure there are other things that people are invested in engaging to that we need to engage with also. A call to action on ways to reshape the city over the next 10 years, and that's in the context of a longer term vision. But we need to take the steps we need to take today to get to where we want to be tomorrow. A guide for future city experiences. Cities should have moments. It's not just one physical domain, but how you move between them and that you have those fantastic experiences. A guide to inform future decisions about infrastructure investment, future amendments, as I've mentioned already, to the planning codes. And to quote our Lord Mayor, who's been out on the media on this one, Lord Mayor Sandy Verschure, Council is strategically investing in making Adelaide a vibrant and culturally alive city where people have the jobs, opportunities and lifestyles they want in Australia's most livable city, which we currently are. A city plan is our roadmap to achieve that. So people want great places. So let's talk great places. We're conceptualising the city plan as a spatial plan that defines a great place. Whether this is a local spot, and I've seen some smiles, some people would already know what this place is. If not, you can read the street sign probably on that particular graphic. It could be a main street, could be a neighbourhood, could be a precinct. And we'll be looking to incorporate all the spatial themes that capture the public realm, the development intent for great places in the city that amplify the unique characteristics of that place. And I'm sure if I went quiet for a minute and just asked you to think about a precinct in this city, you would gravitate to that one that you visit, whether it's a Melbourne Street, O'Connell Street, Hindley Street, a university campus. We have lots of them in a pretty small footprint. We believe this is really important, and we believe it's important because it will articulate the city and its different spatial areas and what they can become, proactively plan for the growth and change that we know we need to engage with, ensure that increasing density isn't at the compromise of livability, provide confidence for investors and developers. If they see the efforts that the city is putting in precincts, they'll understand that their investment will be matched, and we think that's really important, that they see this isn't just a plan we're talking about, but we're backing this plan and investing in it too. Communicate the features and benefits of various parts of our city to future residents and investors, shape our own investment in public realm and activation, provide a central place for all of this content to live and be accessed, and in effect provide a prospectus for investment. Now that might be you decide to live here, or it might be that you decide to build here. Either way, we'd love to see people investing in the city. The city plan will also help to deliver on the needs of the next generation. And I want you to think of this kind of vertically and horizontally. This includes the generational mix that'll be in the city, not just the next young people coming through. And that mix is already diverse. It could be singles, couples, young families, downsizers, retirees. But it needs to be evolving in an ever-changing multicultural mix and an ever-changing multi-generational place for people to live, work and play. So that extends to the responses to residential development. Are we creating the types of spaces that diverse group of people are actually going to want to live in, not just visit? So that we do want the plan to talk to the expectations of those future generations and that generational mix, inclusive of themes of livability and sustainability, which we know are at the forefront of people's minds. Roles that we play. And the 5-minute wind-up, and I'll hit that mark for you all. To get there, we need to actually create enabling policies. Local government just can't talk about it and then not put in the processes to get there. I think what's really fortunate is we were given a little charge by Bernard Salt, for those of you who came to the AIDA Business Summit or maybe read about it in the paper the next day, to be outrageously aspirational. South Australia actually has a legacy of outrageously aspirational policy, whether it's giving women the vote, as sad as that sounds, because they should have had it in the first place, to automated vehicle policy and legislation changes, to small bar licences to sort of enable vibrancy. So that's a legacy we can build on. but we won't do it alone. So this is a little bit of a call to all of you in the room, and I'll love to see you again as we go out into consultation in the coming months. We need our partners. Our partners need us. So we'll do this through development, we'll do this through the development of this document, through its finalisation, and through its delivery. So I look forward to some further engagement with you in that regard. And on that note, our plan is your plan. It's your plan because the people in this room, your influencers, your shapers, your thinkers, your doers, your implementers, you're possibly also investors, residents, city workers. So you're going to wear many hats in this particular journey. You fit into our definition. We invite you and want you to participate in this body of work. And at the moment what we're doing is we're finalising some internal analysis. Haven't spotted some of the faces. We've had some preliminary conversations with people out in the community and our stakeholders and some of the people in the room today potentially, but we'll be out to more. And we're looking to be lined up, so with our new term of council, and a quick plug, there's been 2 elections this year and an extra one if you live in the electorate of Bragg, so maybe your 4th election, but please do come out and vote in local government elections. It's important we pick good leaders to steer us forward and work with us. But post that time, we'll be out engaging really heavily with the community to test this thinking and to develop our plan. So with that, thank you. Thank you for your time and your attention at the end of the day, and that's me. Cheers.
Okay, so we're moving to our last, but certainly not least, presentations of the day. So I'd like to invite to the stage a good friend, Shanti, that I haven't seen since my last visit to here a couple of years ago. Now I've got, inconveniently, your bios aren't on the same page, so this is, just forget it. Yeah, and Nick. All right. That's it. Now you're talking, Natasha. Yeah. So this is Shanti and Natasha. They're going to talk to us. Well done. Okay, thanks.
I'm going to put that there. Back then. I bet you I'm the first one that's done that. Thank you very much for having us today. And again, last, but I'm going with definitely not least. But first, before we get going, we would also like to acknowledge that the land we meet on today is the traditional land of the Kaurna people. We pay our respects to their ongoing spiritual connection to these beautiful lands and waters. We pay our respects to elders past and emerging and present. And we also extend our respects and appreciation to any Aboriginal people with us here today. We thank you very much. So, disclaimer, Shanti didn't want me to, but I'm going to anyway. As of 2 days ago, I was a ring into this presentation. I do have cred in this space, I will tell you though, so I'm not just reading off a script. Our dear colleague, Dr. Alison Crozier, who is leading this work now for Wellbeing SA, is in her last couple of days with COVID. So Nicola said, what has COVID done? It's made schedules be hectic. And so myself, I am the manager for the Early Years Children and Young People team at Wellbeing SA, but prior to that I was the Physical Activity Officer for Wellbeing SA and had the great pleasure of working with Shanti on some of the work that we're going to talk to you about today around the walking strategy. And so that's a little bit about me, but to get us kicked off, Shanti is going to start the presentation, and don't mind us as we do a little dance between the lectern.
Tweedledee and Tweedledum.
That's right.
And we are literally your last hurdle before drinks, so we'll try and make this quick and snappy. Thank you, Natasha, and actually Natasha was my partner in crime. I was so privileged last year to be engaged by the Heart Foundation. The Heart Foundation was fortunate enough to receive funds from Wellbeing SA to prepare South Australia's first walking strategy. This piece of work was important for me because it brought me back to my roots. It reminded me as to why I work in the planning sphere. So our presentation today is perhaps going to provide you with a bit of a reminder, and we have already heard a few reminders during the course of this afternoon around the importance of health and well-being, and really the work that the walking strategy will deliver in years to come is around the well-being of communities. So our presentation is focused on the walking strategy, and we'll start by providing some context before delving into the strategy and your role in it. Now, which one does what? Brilliant, thank you, Tash. So I'm going to take us down a trip memory lane. This image from the 19th century London evokes a number of emotions. So just to recap its importance to me, in the mid to late 19th century, European and American cities experienced a surge of industrial development accompanied by rapid population growth. Sadly, large sprawling cities developed, and many of these developed against a backdrop of great wealth, contrasted against extreme poverty and its consequential effects, as illustrated in this slide. This gave rise to what we now know and is referred to as the progressive movement, from which town planning grew. The slums, congestion, disorder, ugliness and threat of disease provoked a reaction in which sanitation and air quality improvements were necessary. General improvements in public health were generated and by improved water supplies and sewage, followed by improvements in air quality and housing. It was also during this period that extended into the early 20th century that efforts to improve the urban environment emerged, and it's really from these spaces that planning grew. These events were the genesis of modern town planning as we know it today, with legislation and tools being developed to facilitate improvements in living environments and in turn human health and well-being. Sometimes we forget these things, and while planners inherently know this to be our roots, I think sometimes we forget these humble beginnings. So a lot's been spoken today about COVID as well, and I've actually phrased this term that I think COVID is actually a gift. So I'm going to give you some examples of what other cities around the world are doing in responding to this gift of COVID. So governments around the world have seized COVID as an opportunity to reimagine and rethink how our communities and cities are planned. So Paris has a plan to keep cars out after lockdown, and as the city prepares to reopen, Mayor Anne Hidalgo plans to use bike lanes, buses and social distancing to keep more cars off the roads and reduce pollution. And this example is actually an example from 2015, taken in 2015 in Paris, a shot heading towards the Champs-Élysées, where the city trialled removing cars for a day. Imagine what Paris looked like then. So following that trial, by 2024 in Paris, this entire central district of Paris will be substantially car-free. Similarly, over the next decade in Barcelona, it will convert its entire central grid into a greener, pedestrian-friendly area almost totally cleared of cars. For Ilya, maybe the City of Adelaide could think about that. And work that's been undertaken by the Centre for Cities in the UK, they're talking about introducing car-free zones and expanding active travel and reprioritising roads and parking space for other uses, bars, restaurants and shops. Cities throughout the world are making bold moves to transform how their citizens can interact with their environments and in turn create benefits that transcend a multitude of spheres: health, economy, environment, to mention a few. Similarly, here in Australia, the Greater Sydney Commission, it's commissioned a piece of work, and its thinking has permeated governments in Australia, with the Greater Sydney Commission applying the thinking for highly dense cities and how space is occupied being given greater prominence. I'm going to hand over to Natasha for the next few slides.
Thank you. And I guess this has already been talked about, Australia's most livable city, which is fantastic, but I would like to counteract that with these sort of statistics as well. And I think it's really important to mention the fantastic work happening through the Global Observatory of Healthy and Sustainable Cities, and we are very privileged here in Australia to have that leading international work being done by the Professor Billy Giles Corti out at RMIT University, and that data is a great wealth for us here today, and we always refer to it through a health lens too. So, as again, Australia's most livable city, but we do know that 37% of neighbourhoods are below the global average for walkability scores. And then when we think about World Health Organization targets regarding increasing physical activity levels, 0 neighbourhoods reach the population density thresholds. Only 13% achieve street connectivity thresholds, and 54% only of our residents are nearby to public transport with regular service and things like that. So we do know that there is keys around improving planning and infrastructure to change some of these statistics and potentially move us up to maybe number one in the world. And so I guess from a health lens, some might be saying, why walking? There's many reasons why, and some of which are quite innate to us in terms of foundation of human movement. It's the first thing we do when we want to get up and start walking when we're born. We see everyone else doing it and we want to do it too. From a health lens and an equity lens, it is the most equitable and accessible form of movement that we can do from a physical activity perspective. You don't need any facilities, you don't need any equipment. And here it's really important to note that when we talk about walking, especially in the walking strategy, we're talking includes jogging, running, moving with a pram, or the aid of a mobility device. So we are trying to be as inclusive as we can when we're thinking about walking as a form of transport. And also walking does impact all facets of health. And we're not just talking about the physical health, we're also talking about the social, emotional, and mental health and wellbeing of our people in South Australia. We know that just a little bit goes a long way, and even just getting up for a 5-minute walk can change someone's outlook on what's happening in their day, as well as having lasting chronic impacts on their health and wellbeing. We also know that travel to work, we can see that the Adelaide traffic has returned to pre-pandemic levels, and it's important to be mindful of that. And it's also important to be mindful of the fact that public transport has also returned, its highest in May 22 since it has been since January 2020. And I think it's important to note that Adelaide can be seen as quite a car-centric city. We have sprawling neighbourhoods and areas to get to. And so from a behaviour perspective, which what we're talking about when we're thinking of physical activity from a health lens, people are going to do what's easiest for them, what is more convenient for them to get to where they need to be. We're time poor, all of those sorts of things. So we need to make these journeys easier for people. It starts young. So we do know in a former life, I was in charge of writing this physical activity report card for children and young people. And so we do know that at least 70% of kids are being driven to school on a daily basis, and that is their main mode of transport for all other purposes as well. If we build in these habits early on, then that's kind of what the norm is and where they turn to for their later on in life. And we also know that close to 60% of South Australians use motor vehicles as their main form of transport, with 20% walking and 7% cycling. So there is a big gap there that would be great to see it become a lot closer. I'm now going to shift back over to Shanti.
And so in the preparation of the South Australian walking strategy, I was privileged to spend a year of my life being able to research what everybody else is doing, and it's not often you get paid to sit and research things like this. And so I managed to spend a lot of time researching various walking strategies, and I've come up with my favourites. The Rotterdam walking strategy, which was actually prepared pre-pandemic, is a piece of work that happens to be my favourite walking strategy. I would encourage you, if you're interested in walking, to have a look at it. So the reality is this movement to give space to people who walk commenced well before the pandemic. Cities such as Rotterdam are actively working on flipping the narrative as we know it, where the motorised vehicle has been the dominant role in transport, to hand space back to its residents. So Judith Bockhoven, who is Rotterdam's Alderman for Mobility, basically says that they want to have a city where pedestrians have all the space they need because walking and cycling are the default modes of transport. Imagine a city of Adelaide like that. And in my opinion, a world leader, London, it has both a strategy and an action plan. As well as that, it has a walking commissioner, and it's been working on a transformative project since 1996, where it sees walking as a key driver to its economic success, investing in the order of billions of pounds to make walking environments a reality for that city. And the reality for London is that people walk everywhere, because that's what they are intending to achieve. And that's supported by, clearly, the investment that they have placed into it. Australia doesn't lag too far behind. Queensland pipped South Australia at the post, and it released its walking strategy in 2019, and it's supported with a strategy, an action plan and a report card. I'm told that their most recent report card has just been released. That's a 2019 report card, but there is a 2021 report card. Can I just say that the Queensland Government were very generous with Wellbeing SA and the Heart Foundation in assisting us in preparing the South Australian walking strategy. I'm going to hand over back to Tash to talk about the South Australian walking strategy.
And so the walking strategy was based, as Shanti said, on the success of the Queensland one, and we were never going in wanting to reinvent the wheel. We pinched and pulled whatever we could from them, and we used what we could and didn't create our own things. But where we landed was a vision of more South Australians walking more often, all ages, all abilities, with the 3 core pillars there that you can see around transport, recreation and sport, and health and wellbeing. And I think what's really important, and so while the red box, typically when we think about the walking strategy and when we're thinking about planning, that these 2 may be the ones that are the most relevant. However, I think, as Shanti said in her start around, planning and its roots and impacting on health and wellbeing, we need to remember that all of these are interconnected. It's not very likely that there's one person out there that's just walking for one of these purposes only, and sometimes it's for all of them at the same time. You're getting from point A to point B, and you know that that's good for you, and also it's a part of recreation because you're doing it in our beautiful parklands in Adelaide and those sorts of things. But what the data currently tells us is that 50% rarely, never report walking trips less than 1 kilometre over the last week. We know that about 43% walk somewhere for recreation or leisure along walking trails within parks, reserves or reservoirs at least weekly, and that 73% of South Australians reported walking greater than 30 minutes per week of walking. So the stats aren't fantastic. They could be a lot better, but I guess that comes down to the action plan and what we're planning on doing with the walking strategy as well. A bit about the development. It's been mentioned a few times in the presentations that we've seen today around partnerships. Most recently, the one before us, we don't ever do anything on our own in silos. And a big thing for us in health, unfortunately, preventative health especially, we need everyone else. We cannot do it on our own. We don't have the levers or the drivers or the policy levers or the drivers to create these amazing environments, and so partnership is key, which is why you'll see there were 13 agencies that we collaborated with. And as a person alongside Shanti who attended each of the working group meetings, I will tell you that the policy officers engaged across all the different agencies were on board and championing up for this walking strategy and the key actions that we had put in place. We also know that it's really important from a local government perspective to keep the engagement going, especially around what resourcing, what funding's required, how we can support the implementation of the actions as well. One of the key things that Wellbeing SA has done recently, we have things called the Public Health Partner Authority Agreements that sit under the State Public Health Act, and we've recently created one of those with the Local Government Association. And what that has allowed us to do is build in a specific project officer with a wellbeing focus in mind. So not only focused on the walking strategy, but other initiatives and how they can be implemented at the local level. And so these are our priorities, and I'm going to get them up straight away because I think, as we've said before, they're all so connected. It's a classic health promotion approach. We need to attack all levels, all the time, all together in partnership. So priority 1 is around planning for walkable neighbourhoods, towns and cities. Priority 2 is about the building, connected, safe and pleasant walking environments for all. And priority 3 is around creating a South Australian walking culture. And that's where us as Wellbeing SA have sort of started to pull some strings, in essence, in terms of changing that culture, so we can kind of get into the psyche of South Australians and say that walking is the social norm, is what we want to be doing. And hopefully some of you have seen the campaign, but A Walk Can Work Wonders, really triggering some of those key behaviour things that we were talking about. Just a little bit, just 10 minutes, that's all you need. And you can do multiple things while you're doing it. It just doesn't have to be getting out and moving those feet one in front of the other. Shanti.
And so, yeah, just to back up that last slide, those three pillars of policy and legislation, the infrastructure and the education, those three things actually have to work in concert with one another. They cannot work separately, because the minute one of them falls out, the whole thing falls apart. So that's why the action plan for the walking strategy has been drafted like it has, to ensure that those three things can work together and with one another. And just back onto the question of partnerships, this walking strategy would not have been possible without that significant partnership. And, you know, the RAA, and lots of people look at the RAA as a motoring body, the RAA is actually a transport organisation, and so walking is a mode of transport. So think about it like that. So in terms of links of planning and building supportive environments, examples of planning and building supportive environments that planners can aim to enhance. More people choose to walk when everyday destinations are well connected and safe spaces to walk, and this needs to be reflected in planning, both planning policy, planning legislation, and the work in terms of the infrastructure that gets constructed. Things such as shade along walking routes, clever building design, seating, lighting, water fountains, and shaded meeting areas are factors too. Our walking networks need to be planned to be accessible to everyone, including families with prams, strollers, older people, people who move with wheelchairs or walking frames, as well as those who walk and run for recreation and sport. In terms of the role of the planning profession, this slide is actually a slide from Queensland, where they have actually introduced a code for good neighbourhood design. And people often think about planning on private sites, and that's what we get conditioned to in a statutory planning environment. But I'd like you to think about broadening your thinking about how the planning profession is involved in policy that directly supports health outcomes. And this example, if you read the first line, it's to facilitate the creation of walkable neighbourhoods that support healthy and active communities. And the next slide, this is actually an image from Healthy Active by Design, which is collateral that's produced by the Heart Foundation. It's wonderful material if you've never seen it before. Using this sort of material as base information to advocate to state government, advocate to your councils, advocate to your clients about, you know, what good environments and what environmental outcomes can look like in terms of supporting community health. And I'm going to hand back to you, Natasha.
So we know everyone's going, come on guys, come on, we're getting to that 5 p.m. So we've got one more minute, I reckon. So really, when we're thinking about planning for the wellbeing of our future, we are kind of looking to you to see what changes can be made so that walking is the go-to. It is the norm. It is what everyone's doing, because they do have productive as well as health and wellbeing benefits to all of the South Australians that we have. And I guess as Shanti might finish us off with this one.
So we've seen lots of slides during the course of today, I'm sure. So can we return to contemporary planning routes where population health is more considered? If we're prepared to work in a genuine and collaborative way to get more South Australians walking more often, we need everyone's help, even the planning profession. As an example, this is an example from Lightsview. Lightsview was an example that is probably 15 years old now, but it included innovative design and careful regard for a sustainable lifestyle, and it included community wellbeing, environmental protection, and the integration of social and cultural services and facilities. So in the developments that you're involved with, think about how physical activity and how active travel can be part of the solution. And I was curious to hear from Stuart about infrastructure. We always talk about infrastructure. Where does active travel fit into that infrastructure space? We need to start thinking actively about cycling, walking, how people with mobility devices get around. It's not just about the private motor vehicle. So just as London, Amsterdam, New York, Paris are thinking about how their communities get around. South Australians, we need to start thinking about how our communities get around, how our communities can benefit from the space that is provided so that their health can be taken care of, and not just their health, their mental health and their well-being. Thank you, and that's from us.
Thank you very much, Natasha and Shanti, and great way to finish. You bring it down to the ground, you know, how we get around. You know, if we're able-bodied, everything we do pretty much starts and ends with a walk. So, and as a current board member of Queensland Walks, I was very pleased to hear that you our material was useful. I actually tweeted and included our minister to sort of go, look at this, you know. So, yes, so thanks very much. All right. Now, you know, I'm sure everyone would like a lot more information, wouldn't you? No, listen, it's been a big day. It's been a great day. It's covered an immense amount of material. I think congratulations to those who put this together, Jane and Liz and the team, well done. Everyone I'd like you to do three things, but don't do them until I've told you the three, all right? The first one is to stand up. The second one is to make eye contact with someone in the room you don't know. And the third one is to give them a smile and a wave, a cheer, like this, you know? Okay? Right, so here we go. Everyone stand up. Make eye contact with someone you don't know. Give her a friendly cheer and a wave, that's it. There we go. All right. You know, yeah. So thanks for doing that. I just wanted to sort of reset a little bit, but you can all go home and tell your family you made a new friend today, all right? Yeah, so it just falls to me to do a few things. We're on the home straight, I guarantee you, but I did want to, so I go to these ones. Thanks, Jacob. Yeah. So I just wanted to do a few things. I do want to summarise some of the things we heard today, a bit of an eclectic wander through, but just to remind you of some of the things that you've all heard a lot. And I do want to pull together maybe a small number of themes and then issue you with a challenge to finish off. We'll do a few of the closing things, and then I'll ask your President, Kate, up to make some closing remarks. So, you with me? Righto, let's go. Wasn't that a fantastic welcome to country? I mean, I've done this a lot, and I reckon that was one of the best I've seen anywhere. It was wonderful, it was human, it was inclusive, it was just fantastic. So, Mickey O'Brien, you know, hat off to you. The concept of PIA-led change, I think, came up early, you know, that you are in this game now. You're part of this rollout of the new system. This is what Sally was telling us, that, you know, that there's a... I really love the fact they're going to do a survey which is how you're feeling about it, not just the detail of how it's working. Successful change is about hearts and minds. You know, you've got to understand both and where people are at. So data's great, but tell stories, you know, tell people how you feel. So I thought that was fantastic. Neil McFarlane, you know, emissions are critical. South Australia got particular challenges and droughts, bushfires, heat stress, coastal risk, and having a single point of truth and an agency which is dedicated to helping us as a profession do this is really fundamentally important. And again, I think you're actually ahead of the field here, having that sort of central point of truth for government. Ralph McLaughlin, you know, in a great spicy cough performance all the way from the other side of the big pond, did remind us of a few great things. There's no clear evidence that price growth is due to planning. And it was a great observation he made. There's that planning affects supply, sure, but it also affects demand. You know, if we create lots of livable places, people are going to want to live there. And in fact, there's work done by Christopher Leinberger in the US which says that walkable communities are more expensive than anywhere else because they haven't got enough of them, you know? So if we do our job better and broader, we will be creating a really great way of addressing that issue of the cost, the COVID cost. I attended a couple of one of the sessions. I can't do all of the individual sessions, but David Bailey, in his volunteer role with the Planning Institute, reminded us of the 10 asks of the great work that PIA is doing around climate change, both nationally but also locally here. Jennifer Bowman, in the Transport Action Network that's been formed here, these things are crucial. There are communities around the world where it's the formation of the network of active entities, so community-led, that actually create great change. So, and you know, she was talking about active transport too, which we've just heard from the other speakers. Now, going on, okay. Anthony Kelly, he's not still with us, but, you know, looking back to look forward, you know, I learned a lot about the South Australian planning system there that I didn't know. Ellie Davidson, you know, the importance of country, the importance of thinking about country, the concept of country being internal to what we do as a profession, not something that is just out there on the edges. And you know, understanding that a lot of our cities are actually based on that original culture and knowledge. Craig Holden, who's not here now, but he talked about gearing up for the future. You know what I took out of that was the State Planning Commission has gone 5G. Okay, growth, governance, guidance, government, and grassroots. How about that? How'd I go? Well done. That was a pretty good summary, wasn't it? The minister, you know, like you've got a great minister there. He's committed, he's humble, he's interested, he's supportive, he wants to talk to you as a profession. And you've got a government with a mandate of change and planning for the future for a great future of future generations here. I loved his slip there. He accidentally said IPA instead of PIA, but he got back to PIA rather than IPA. He said, make sure you're not listening to that, the Murdoch push, you know. Anyway, but also the fact that notwithstanding all of the great work that Sally talked about rolling out the new system, there will be the sort of short, sharp review that's going to happen. And so, you know, watch this space, get involved. I'm sure PIA will be actively involved in that. Nicole Spurrier, that was a fantastic presentation, I thought, just really engaging. But I think she said some great things, and I don't want to try and get all of them, but the one take-home message is that pandemics start with the degraded environment. The more we degrade our environment, the more pandemics we're going to have. So this is not like, you know, climate change is actually causing now pandemics. So it's a climate change thing as much as a health thing. The role of the street, you know, dance outside. That was the message I got from that. But I thought, you know, the sense of the strengthening of community. So there's a lot of threads here which actually all come together, I think. Stuart Mosley, bravely taking on the last speaker of that action-packed session, reminded us that we spend too much time trying to get the 30% right and not enough to getting the 70% right, as in we all want infill, but we spend all our time designing the greenfields and not actually focusing enough on the infill. And the importance of urban growth boundaries, of having a sequencing approach, dedicated agency which can do it, and having infrastructure plans and charging regimes. So really important things for Adelaide and your state as to where you are now. Ilya, the concept of city shaping in itself, I think, is a good one. You know, thinking a little bit beyond the two dimensions that planning traditionally works in, and all of those rich threads that you're pulling together in the work you're doing. I did like the new norm is not the old norm, and it took me straight back to the slip, slop, slap campaigns, you know, but not that norm, righto, yeah, that's probably about half the audience, I think, didn't get that, yeah, okay. But I think, you know, the partnerships, the outrageously progressive policy legacy you have here, which you can take into the future, a wonderful connection, you know, of that. So thanks for that. Shanti and Natasha, I'm just going to summarise this by saying it's walking for the win, you know, and it's not a time to rest on your laurels here. It's the opposite. The rest of the world is walking on. Adelaide has the opportunity to join the parade, and that was the invitation for us all to put our shoulder to the wheel. I think I may have mixed a few metaphors there, but you know, you get the gist. Yeah. So let's just pick out a few big themes. How are you going? You with me so far? Yeah, there's a few people going. Anyway, let's give it a crack. So my big themes are that South Australia is ready to sail the 7 seas. So The first one is centricity, putting people at the middle of everything you do. A great community is made up of great places that Ilya talked about, great streets that we heard from many of the people, including the walking, role of streets. This tremendous public asset we have that we just tend to use for one thing mainly. It's a wonderful asset. So, people places are walkable places, and that's that C. Putting our centricity in everything we do around people. The C is the COVID, of course, which has shaken things up. And some of those things will stay forever. And what we've got out of that in this part of the world is that you will be dealing with significant growth from now on. And that's not necessarily the history of this place. It takes different mindsets, different tools and different things that you need to do as a profession. But I can tell you from coming from somewhere that's been doing it for 40 years, it's bloody good fun, but it's really hard, but it's challenging, but it is wonderfully energising professionally. So I invite you to rise to that challenge as a profession here. The third one was culture. We heard a lot about that in many aspects, but I wanted to come back to the Indigenous culture and the importance of mainstreaming that we heard from a number of speakers. I get 2 Cs in here with climate change, so it was pretty neat. I was struggling to get that 7th C, And but climate change, one of our biggest challenges, and if we're not in the forefront of addressing that as a profession, then I think we are failing in our duty as a public interest profession. The last one, second last one is cost. That business about, planning is not just about affecting supply, it's affecting demand. So we do actually have the levers on both sides of the equation to actually help that housing affordability issue that we're all dealing with at the moment. And the last one is convenience, and that's a bit of a stretch really, but what I meant by that is infrastructure. So many people talked about the importance of planning land use and infrastructure together. Stuart would have heard me say on many occasions in Queensland doing the regional plan, the key to any plan for any place is integrating land use and transport. If you get that right, you get a great place. If you get it wrong, you're really in trouble. So that's the last one. So that's my summary. Could you rate, those of you who thought I got 8 out of 10 or better, could you put your hand up? No, there's a few you didn't. That lady down there, could you put your hand up? Thank you. All right, yeah, that's great. No, thanks very much. It's a hard job, but I hope that's been useful. And I just want to leave you with this challenge in terms of the content of the profession, of the whole day today. It's been an action and information-packed day, but I really want you to think about what you'll do differently, having heard what you've heard today, not only in your day job, but in your life. We all individually contribute to our communities, but we do it in our day job, but we do it as a member of our communities. So reflect on what you've heard, and I really would like to challenge you to say, what am I going to do differently that I think I can make an impact on from what you've learnt today? So that's my summary, and just quickly then we'll go on to a couple more things before I invite Kate up. So first of all, thank you so much for your attendance. Look, this is a crowded room, and you're all here still. Did you hear about the drinks afterwards? Did you? No. It's great that so many people have stayed here for today. It's great to have a big crowd. I want to acknowledge once again and thank the sponsors, which I'll do on Kate's behalf. So can we just flick to that, Liz? There we go. So Mella Olsen is our platinum sponsors, so that was fantastic of them to do that. Jensen Plus, and I know we got Plenary from that business over there as silver sponsors, together with the AGD and URPS, and I know we got a number of URPS people with us today as well. The bronze sponsors, don't forget Ethos Urban, yeah, go Ethos Urban, and Waldman's Lawyers, and also City 2050. Got it out, Don't forget to listen to that podcast, people. Okay. I want to bump it down numbers. Okay. And our refreshment sponsors, Mello Olsen Lawyers again, and the closing network sponsors are Plan Cover. And we got, where are you, mate? That's the man from Plan Cover, so he'll be with us. He's sponsoring the drinks, so if you want to talk to him about Plan Cover and what they do and how they can help you, please do that while you're having a drink. So the drinks will be outside and they'll go till 6:30, I think. So that's all from me. You'll be pleased to hear. You know, there's a few people went, oh, thank God, you know. And I'll invite Kate up for some closing remarks. Kate, welcome.
Thanks, Greg. And look, I think you've actually stolen some of my thunder, so we won't go over that. But I think some of the take-home is planning is complex, but how exciting is it that we work in planning? I am just thrilled with today. I'm thrilled with the industry. We have got so much to offer and deliver and shape and work to the future. We are future builders, and that's really important. So I think we are evolutionists, maybe not revolutionists, but maybe some of us are revolutionists, but definitely we are evolutionists. And there's no single planning system that is perfect. And if it was perfect, we probably wouldn't have the exciting roles that we do. The relationship with the government and the minister is really strong. The amount of work that PIA did through the planning code is significant, and I want to thank Eleanor for leading all of that. You know, the role that she undertook as our previous president was instrumental in getting us that strong relationship, so that's been fantastic, together with our past presidents. But I must admit, a smile did come to my face when Nick, and let me call him Nick, is President Kate. So, you know, I have known him for a long time. It was really neat. I loved it. Look, lastly, thank you, Greg, for your emceeing. It has been a fantastic day, consummate professional, but very engaged, and thank you so much for your kind words. I want to thank Jane Strange, our State Manager, for pulling today together. It is a significant event for the division and a really, really important one to keep us at the forefront of planning. And sitting alongside Jane are four of our members who, without them, we wouldn't have achieved today. So Terry Sutcliffe, thank you so much for coming in. I think Terry was here at 6:30, 6:15, no? 7:30. Gurney Kira, who's not unable to be here right to the end. Sally Lewis also came in really early and helped Jane with the setup and everything, and Emily Hendricks. And I certainly want to thank their contribution for the day. It's just been fantastic. Our presenters, of course, and you. You are the most important people in the room. And I really want to thank you and your ongoing support. I look forward to having a glass of wine with you out there, and be safe over the weekend. Enjoy a family environment, walking, and please join us for a drink. Thank you.